how you guys are using Bayesian
Yep.
networks in BayesiaLab. I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. And thanks for having us. I'm just going to spend about 5 minutes setting up the context from which Praveen and Ku did this research so that you have sort of an idea about why we were doing what we were doing. So for those of you who don't know, Lyft is a ride-sharing service. Our major competitor is Uber, although AV is coming on strong with every passing week. We have a dual-sided marketplace, so we service both riders and drivers, and we connect them to take a ride. So every week we have 5.5 million riders who choose Lyft to get to where they're going, and we have 500,000 drivers out on the road earning on our platform. But each trip is a transaction, but it's much more of a transaction. It's very much an experience, and that experience relates on to how they think about the Lyft brand. So for that reason, the head of market research at Lyft, we spend a lot of time really understanding the motivations, the needs and the wants of both the riders and the drivers, because at the end of the day, it does impact the Lyft brand. So I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about our drivers first. First and foremost, they're independent contractors. They drive when they want to drive. They drive for as long as they want to drive. And flexibility is absolutely the number one reason why they're choosing to earn with Lyft. But having said that, 91% of them have another job. So Lyft is very much a supplemental part of their income. But for 37% of them, it's a necessary part of their income in order for them to meet their needs. So earnings is as important as the flexibility that we give them. But when you talk to drivers, they're not talking about that. They complain about their earnings all the time, don't get me wrong, but they're really talking about their interactions with their riders. They love driving. They love the stories that they hear from the other riders. They love experiencing new places. Every time that they're driving, it's a new adventure, and that's in a lot of ways that's what keeps them coming back. But we have a huge opportunity. By one of the industry research reports, Lyft only has about 18% of the existing driver supply. There are DoorDash, there's Uber, there's Amazon Flex, there's Instacart, all competing for this gig economy hour. And in fact, 70% of Lyft drivers also drive on other platforms. So our opportunity is to not only get more drivers onto our platform to increase that 18%, but also to get them to choose more hours driving with Lyft versus one of these other gig economy platforms. So that's problem number one that I called Ku and Praveen and said, help me fix. So now let's talk about on the rider side. We have a similar but different story. So on the rider side, we have 40 million people in 2024, over more than 40 million people who took a Lyft at least once. That market is growing by the day. They use Lyft mostly for specific use cases. So 59% of them use the Lyft to go to and from the airport or some other travel-related needs. 58% of them use it to go to a concert or go out to a bar, so they don't have to drive and drink, to a sporting event. At the same time, we have 35% that are using it on a daily basis. They are using it as a commuter tool to get to and from work or to an important appointment or a medical, to a doctor's visit. We're competing in this case not only against Uber, so they have to get them to choose Lyft over Uber once they choose rideshare, but they're taking their private car. They're taking a public bus. They're walking. They're taking a bike. So Lyft is also in a marketplace for them choosing which form of transportation they use. So our problems on the opportunity we see that we're trying to solve for on the rider side is not only do we get more riders taking Lyfts, but how do we get the riders that are already deciding to take rideshare to take them for these other use cases where they would take their private car, and then how do we get them to choose Lyft over taking Uber or taking an autonomous vehicle? So we did a lot of research leading up to this, and when I presented it to Ku and to Praveen, I was like, okay, we know a lot about what drivers and riders care about, but how do they interact, and how do we hit the magic buttons to get them to prefer Lyft more than everything else in the marketplace. So the things that we really focused in on was safety. Riders and drivers both talk about safety. Number one out of their mouth is safety. They define it differently, which is very interesting, but safety is number one. The second thing that they talked about was on the driver's side is how do they maximize their earnings? If they go out and they drive at 9 a.m. on a Thursday, they want to know, I can expect to make about this amount of money between 9 and 12 every week that I do it. So they want to maximize their earnings by knowing when and where to drive. Riders, on the other side, want fair and predictable pricing. They don't want to have to pay $60 to the airport one day and then $85 to the airport the next day. They really want to understand the reliability of their pricing. Drivers also just want to have a good interaction. They want to provide great service. They're having a stranger getting into the back of the car that they own, and they want to have control over that experience and make that good. They also want to feel like, you know what? I just helped her get to a very important appointment that her car was broken down and she had no other way of getting there. So they have this sense of pride that they're really contributing to the community good. And we want to capitalize on that too, because that keeps drivers on the road. On the rider side, they want, if the app says, and they blame Lyft, if the app says that the driver's going to be here in 3 minutes, I don't want the driver here in 10. I want them here in 3. And I also want a comfortable ride. And that comfortable definition of comfort really depends on the rider. So I gave this whole bucket of information to Praveen Koo, and I said, okay, help us with a model that interconnects all of these different things that riders and drivers are talking about, and help us figure out how we can position ourselves in the marketplace to be the preferred choice of rideshare. So I'm going to pass it to Praveen now to tell us what he did.
Thank you, Sally. Sally has set the stage very well. She gave us a modeling challenge. She identified what are the needs. And statistically, how do we connect? How do we connect the safety? How do we connect comfort? How do we connect the trust? The overview of the modeling was that we used 2 different modeling techniques. One of them was Bayesian network. The other was the bivariate regressions. But these are just models. Effectively, what is the use of these models? The use of these models is that Lyft must get something, Sally must get an answer, what exactly they should be doing. So we use the learnings from both these models. We intuitively, as well as statistically, we combine both of them to get to what we call as prioritization analysis, which gives a clear-cut guideline. These are the attributes where Lyft should work on to maximize what we are looking for in the market. I just talked about this. I'll be talking about 3 different components in my part of the presentation. The first component is the details about the Bayesian network. Second will be the details about the bivariate regression. And the third will be, which is the most important, most practical one, which is how did we combine the learnings to come up with something what we call as prioritization analysis.
Add another microphone to you. Okay, keep going.
Thank you. Sally mentioned about riders. She also mentioned about drivers. Typically in marketing research world, when we do a study, it is only for one segment of the population. It is very difficult to mix up 2 different segments when the attributes are totally different. There may be some overlap, but they are not going to be 100% overlapping. We did the rider study. We had 900 respondents in this. We measured the safety sentiment for the 900 participants. When it comes to the driver study, by the way, here the word used is driver. We are all modelers. Normally what we do is in a model, we say the independent variables, they are the drivers, and there's an outcome variable. But here we are talking about the Lyft drivers. Also, again, we are modelers. When we talk about Lyft, we talk of LIFT. You change the independent variable by 1 unit. What will be the Lyft in the outcome? Here we are talking of LYFT. In the driver study, we are talking about driver connection. And again, we are all Bayesian network modelers. We talk about connection between the nodes. Here we are talking about the connection, the drivers, the sense of feeling, how connected they feel with the Lyft company. That is the connection. So just a few clarifications. We had 828 respondents in this study. Let's talk about the first component, which is the Bayesian network analysis. There are 3 steps in this. The first step is tree augmentation naive Bayes model. We make use of the underlying algorithm in R. I know there was a question, what do we use? It is called BNLearn. We use that in R package. We have built up our own modifications. We learn from the BayesiaLab experience. Our algorithm finds out the connection between each attribute and the outcome variable. Also, it finds the connection between the attribute with the other attributes. What is the use of this? The use of all this is that we are able to come up with a tree, and it is just not a naive Bayes tree, because naive Bayes tree, we heard in one of the presentations this morning, it assumes that all the attributes are independent. We know in practical world it does not happen. And many a time, the naive Bayes model itself gives a very good network, but there is always a scope for improvement. That is what we all modelers look forward to. Therefore, when we use this tree augmented naive Bayes, we find that there is always an improvement over naive Bayes. In the morning, there was a discussion about setting the standards for Bayesian network analysis. Sometimes we overlook them, but there are a few measures we should always be measuring. And one of the critical measures out of many measures we use many measures like pseudo R squared. We look at accuracy, we look at the predictability. We look at the improvement over the naive Bayes model. That is one of the standards we use. The other term to talk about in the Bayesian network modeling is, we'll talk more in detail about it, which is the community detection. In the community detection, we make use of the CNM algorithm, which is the Closet Newman-Moore algorithm. What is the use of this algorithm? The use of this algorithm is that it is able to identify the communities within the attributes, and we'll soon look at a map how the communities are. The criteria is that within the communities, there should be highest relationship. Across the communities, it is certainly going to be some of this learning into the prioritization analysis. Now talking about the second part. The second part of modeling is bivariate regressions. One can say it's a very, very preliminary one. Absolutely, it is very preliminary. However, compared to the correlations, we all know that there's a lot of advantage of bivariate regression models. In the correlations, we are not able to make any prediction. But in bivariate regressions, we are able to make a prediction which is straightforward to interpret. Again, the outputs from the bivariate regression model we are using as inputs into our prioritization analysis. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Now let us go deeper into bivariate regressions from practical point of view. From practical point of view, what is the use of doing it? As researchers, we are dealing not only with the statistical people, we are also dealing with the non-statistical people. We are dealing with the top executives. We have a president from one of the companies. We have many, we have a CEO, we have people. They may not be thinking so much in terms of statistics. They are thinking more in terms of practicality. So from practicality point of view, unless the model can speak to them, they can really understand what is the language, it's very difficult. Bivariate regression, it provides straightforward coefficients which are easy to interpret, it's easy to communicate, and we use these outputs as one of the inputs into our prioritization. Now let's look at how do the communities look like from the Bayesian network analysis. We had a total of 23 attributes here in this model. These attributes people can call as experiences, or they can call them as features. What did we do? We made use of the mutual information. The advantage of mutual information is it is definitely different from correlations, which we all are aware of. Correlations is talking about the relationship between any two attributes. But mutual information is going beyond. What it is saying is that information about a variable, to what extent does it reduce the uncertainty about the other variables? And that is what BayesiaLab has been using for years. And that's what is inbuilt in our TAN model structure, which is providing us the tree augmented naive-Bayes network. We can see on the right-hand side, there are 4 communities. We'll talk about the communities, how the CNN algorithm worked for them. But these communities are showing that each attribute is connected to the other one. I know sometimes we like to show the arrows because for the audience, it becomes very easy to understand what is affecting what. But in fact, we are all statisticians. We know that it is the age-old debate. Is there a causality effect? And sometimes people misinterpret arrows as causality. We all know it is not causality. I know we have one participant who wanted to understand the causality. We might claim we are talking about causality, but it is more a combination of our hypothesis, what could be causing what, and models are just either validating that hypothesis or they are not validating. In these relationships, one of the things which we observe is, are they making intuitive sense? And sometimes we hear back from the clients, like in Lyft case. We looked at it, this is a structure, there was a question, is this structure determined by the data or is it something we have come up with ourselves? In this case, it was purely from the data. And we looked at it intuitively, we looked at the statistical standards which I talked about, and we found this is working very fine. Many a time we come up with a situation when the client insists, no, this attribute does not seem to fit in here. Can we move it from here to another place? In those cases, we always look at the improvement criteria. How much is the improvement over the naive-Bayes model? And accordingly, we make a decision. In this case, the data held very strong. We are proud of it. It happens many a time. The data holds very, very strong. How did we come up with those communities? I mentioned earlier about the CNN algorithm. The CNN algorithm makes sure that the communities are distinct from each other. One of the advantages of CNN algorithm is that it makes sure that the number of communities is pretty well balanced. It doesn't go to something like out of 23, doesn't make 11 or 12 communities. The other advantage is that it makes sure each of the community has got a decent size of attributes. It is not that one community is having just 1 or 2 attributes, another community comes up with something like 8 or 9 attributes. It's a very, very good balance while maintaining the statistical integrity of the model. The 4 communities we talked about, and Sally mentioned about them, those are partnership, they are about safety, and safety is again common between riders and drivers, and wallet, and recognition. Now let's come up to the prioritization, which I've been talking about. How did we make use of bivariate regression results for prioritization? We picked up from each of the communities, we picked up the coefficients which are coming as the highest in that community, not just one of them. That was one of the criteria. And we picked up more than one from each of the communities. The second thing we looked at is out of the attributes, some of the attributes are more actionable than the others. There is no point in bringing some attributes where we know that either the company does not have the capacity to make a change on that too much. We also did not bring up any attributes where the performance may be already at the top. That means for prioritization, it may not give us much of a good result. In prioritization, what the algorithm is doing is, it is taking each of the attributes one by one. It moves it from the current level to one level up and looks at the improvement. It is something like a turf analysis, which is the total unduplicated reach and frequency. Once it finds the highest performing attribute, it fixes it. The increment is already fixed. Now it looks at the remaining ones. It adds to the first one without moving the first one because it is fixed already. And now it looks at one by one which of them is going to give the most improvement in the outcome. And this way, it becomes an iterative process. And ultimately, it comes up with a chart which looks like this. In this chart, what it is showing is that we take one attribute out of all the potential improvement, what percentage contribution is coming from the very first one. So if the company has got resources to spend, maybe on just two of them, they can take the top two, and we can see they are going in the descending order. Improvement in the first one gives an improvement of 33%. If we add the second one, it is not up to 33%, but it is still the highest out of the remaining, that's 18%, and so on. From the management point of view, from the executive point of view, from the leadership point of view, it becomes really actionable. They don't want to see the previous slides. They definitely like the structure. They like the structure to understand, to conceptualize what the attributes in the model are. But now they are looking forward to what should we pick department they are to work with. And then the second one is offers helpful safety features. This is also called the resource allocation strategy. The two advantages people want to know, why did we select Bayesian network analysis? The two main advantages are, one is the conceptual advantage, wherein instead of looking at 23 attributes in isolation, people can look at the four major constructs we talked about. And the second main advantage is that it gives them an actionable guidance that don't look at any one or two or three or four, just look at, and you can make a decision, a calculated decision, depending on your resources, what kind of return you can get, and where you should focus your priorities on. With this, this is the modeling process I talked about. I'll pass it on to Khu. Khu will talk about what exactly did we discover in this entire modeling and how Sally made use of it.
And this one is from manager. Oops. Great.
Feel like a TikToker. Be sure to like and follow for more. Subscribe. So as Praveen mentioned, now that we've seen how the model is structured, we're going to take a look at the human patterns that really surfaced when we started to connect every part of the Lyft experience. And the focus on this is going to be on the driver's side, just for brevity. But what the first step identified is that certain attributes, of course, are higher impact than others when it comes to building loyalty and providing great service. So here you can see the highest impact ones: feeling recognized for their good work, motivated to provide great service, communications, and then all the way down to low impact. You'll notice those are not necessarily unimportant for anyone, but they are just tools that are really expected to be there at any platform providing the service. So things like navigation, efficiency, earning visibility, they are lower priority here, but that's not because they're not important. They're just expected to already exist for any platform. And so at this point, the findings are linear. This is that linear regression point. And so here we go into the community finding. And so the community detection that Praveen mentioned revealed these four groups of attributes: safety, partnership, recognition, wallet. You can see what kind of groups into each one of those and how they ladder into a strategic opportunity. And so at this point, we have more of a strategic framework on how Lyft can influence driver sentiment moving forward. And on where to invest. I'm getting ahead of myself on a slide. And so next step was to look at the competitive context. So far, this has been very Lyft focused, but the study included Lyft drivers, dual drivers that prefer Lyft, dual drivers that prefer Uber. And so as part of this, we kind of identified certain areas of strength for Uber and Lyft. Uber is really in areas on safety features, driver earnings, issue resolution, whereas Lyft excels on motivation, recognition, bonuses. And so when you're thinking about how to turn some of this into a strategy moving forward, you can play into your own strengths and then also identify areas to improve to improve perceptions as to what might be an industry standard that's expected. All right, so now we know what's important, how they group together, how Lyft compares versus Uber. And so we really get into that prioritization that Praveen mentioned. So identifying which levers they can pull that would have the greatest impact. And so Praveen kind of mentioned this about how the analysis is done, simulating a one level increase on any of these attributes and seeing what impact that would be on something like preference. And so the highest impact attributes, again, were safety features, driver comfort, and those significantly increase user preference scores versus the others. And then the importance of this is that it also brings data validated cross-functional alignment. So when you want to go to your product teams, your marketing teams, your operations teams, you are showing them a very data-based argument for why certain areas should be prioritized and focused that can be relied on and kind of be bulletproof. So where does it all land? If there's one takeaway from this, it's that the Lyft experience isn't identified by anything in isolation, like a price or app feature. It's both intrinsic, extrinsic ideas, and it's a connected system of human experiences. So when drivers feel supported, recognized, riders also feel safer and more cared for. You end up with this cyclical experience improvement if you're able to keep those things improved throughout both phases of both sides of their business. Emotional, functional, relational drivers all interact, shape perceptions. Connection and recognition are catalytic. So again, that cyclical nature of this, drivers who feel supported create safer, more trusted rides for riders. And then there's the ripple effect of each of these changes. So identifying the prioritization areas and initiatives that would drive measurable impacts in preference and loyalty. I flew through that. Any questions?